What kind of power does it take to pour hot coffee on a sick, elderly black man? And what kind of power walks in behind him and makes the whole room stand up? It started with a cough and a coat too thin for the morning. Isaiah Bell, 72, heart monitor sticker still clinging to his chest, for tape itching his wrist, slid into a vinyl booth at Millie's Diner after discharge. He ordered oatmeal and toast, not because he was hungry, but because the nurse said, "Eat something warm while you wait for your ride." His ride was his daughter, Naomi Bell, a reform mayor with the city's weight in her calendar and her father's name set to favorites. Then the door chimed and Power swaggered in. Officer Troy Harker, thick-necked, thick-skinned, and famous for making people feel small. He took one long look at Isaiah's trembling hand on the formica and decided a lesson needed teaching. "Up," he said, tapping the badge on his chest like a gavel. "Cop seat." Isaiah smiled the way weary men do when the world has taught them to swallow thunder. "Son, I'm not strong enough to stand just yet." Harker barked at him, "Old man, do I look like a nurse to you? This is my favorite space. Get up or you will regret it." He quickly snapped his fingers at the waitress, ordered a black coffee, and when it came, steam ghosting in the fluorescent light, he tilted the paper cup and poured it slowly across Isaiah's sleeve and shoulder, brown running like a stain across a lifetime of dignity. Gasps froze the diner. The smell of burnt coffee filled the air. Then the door opened again. Naomi Bell stepped in, poised, powerful, and still wearing her mayor's badge. Her voice came out like a scalpel, "Officer, state your name and badge number." He answered with the laziness of impunity. Then she reached for a napkin, dabbed her father's sleeve, and raised a cold gaze at the officer and said, "You just assaulted a sick, elderly man, and you did it in front of your mayor." That's when everything began to unravel. A diner spill became a city storm, and a daughter's vow would turn into subpoenas, statements, and a line of victims ready to speak their names, one by one. Every secret the officers buried will be dragged into the light. Every name they mocked will have a microphone. And every person they silenced will finally be heard. Before we dive into how these officers were brought to their knees, kindly subscribe, share this with someone who needs to see it, and stay through the last minute. Your watch time is how these truths keep breathing. Now, let's go back to that moment in Millie's Diner. Isaiah Bell had always believed in small mercies. He was 72, a retired school janitor, and fresh from the hospital, discharged just that morning after a mild heart episode. The nurse had told him to take it slow, eat something light, and wait for his daughter to pick him up. So he walked 3 blocks, steadying himself with each breath, and slid into his favorite corner booth at Millie's Diner. He never imagined that kindness could turn cruel so fast. The diner was half empty. A radio murmured old jazz through a crackling speaker. Behind the counter, Millie, short, round, always in motion, poured coffee for the regulars. Isaiah smiled, thanked her, and rubbed the tape still stuck to his wrist where the 4 had been. He was thinking of his daughter, Naomi, the mayor. She'd been fighting another late-night council session, promising reforms that made half the city cheer and the other half grind their teeth. But to him, she was still the little girl who once fell asleep on his shoulder during bus rides home. He was proud of her. He was tired. He just wanted a quiet breakfast. Then the door opened, and there came Officer Troy Harker. The man whose presence filled the space like noise given form. Late 30s, uniform pressed sharp, eyes scanning like a man who owned whatever his boots touched. His presence changed the air. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Millie's smile faltered. Even the radio seemed to lower its volume. Harker's gaze landed on Isaiah. And he saw not a man recovering from surgery, just another black body in a place he thought didn't belong to them. He walked up, close enough for Isaiah to smell the stale coffee on his breath. "You in my spot," he said. Isaiah blinked. "Your spot?" Harker nodded toward the window booth. "Cops sit here. Department rule." Isaiah smiled politely, the kind of smile you use to calm dogs you're not sure will bite. "Didn't see a sign, son. I'll be done soon." Harker's lips curved upward, not into humor, but hunger. "Son, huh? You talk to all officers like that?" Isaiah said nothing. He'd spent a lifetime knowing when silence was safer. The waitress, nervous, tried to diffuse it. "Officer Harker, I can bring you coffee at the counter." He raised a hand. "No. I want this booth." He stared down at Isaiah. "Move." Isaiah's fingers tightened on his spoon. "I'm waiting for my daughter. I just need a few more minutes." That should have been the end of it. But power hates patience. Harker turned toward Millie. "Bring me a coffee. Black." When she set it down, he didn't drink it. He just looked at Isaiah, still seated, still calm, and said almost softly, "You think being old means you can disrespect a badge?" Then he tipped the cup. Hot coffee spilled across Isaiah's chest, dripping down his jacket, soaking into the fabric. He inhaled sharply, more from shock than pain. The room froze. A man in the back muttered something under his breath. Millie gasped, hand to her mouth. But Isaiah didn't shout, didn't curse, didn't even stand. He just looked up at the man who'd done it and said, "You didn't have to." Those 4 words landed heavier than any punch. Harker straightened, satisfied. "Next time, remember who keeps this city safe." And that's when the door opened again. The wind that followed seemed to clear the air. Naomi Bell stepped in, black coat, pressed slacks, city seal pinned to her lapel. Her face held the exhaustion of someone who'd been up since before dawn, but her eyes, sharp and alive, softened when they found her father. Then she saw the coffee, the trembling, the badge. Her voice dropped low. "Dad, what happened?" Isaiah managed a faint smile. "Just a little spill." Harker turned. "Lady, mind your business." This man was... Naomi's tone cut clean through his sentence. "Officer, name and badge number." He hesitated. "Who's asking?" She stepped closer, enough that her reflection filled the gold sheen of his badge. "Mayor Naomi Bell. You just poured coffee on my father." Silence. Millie nearly dropped a glass. A man at the counter whispered, "Mayor Bell?" Harker's mouth opened, then closed. The arrogance on his face drained into confusion, then dread. He was being disrespectful," he stammered. Naomi turned to her father, gently dabbing his sleeve with a napkin. "You okay?" He nodded, voice small. "Don't cause trouble over me." Her reply was steady, quiet, dangerous. "This isn't trouble. This is accountability." She stood tall again, facing the officer. "You're suspended effective immediately. Internal Affairs will contact you before noon. Until then, hand over your badge." He blinked, disbelieving. "You don't have that authority." "Try me." Her calm didn't waver. She extended her hand. After a long, shaking pause, he placed the badge into her palm. Naomi looked at it for a moment, then set it on the counter like evidence. "I've heard about officers like you, Officer Harker. I just never thought one would find his way to my father's breakfast table." The waitress exhaled softly, relief mixing with tears. Naomi helped Isaiah to his feet. He was still trembling, but there was pride in his eyes. "You shouldn't have had to step in," he murmured. "I shouldn't have to," she said, "but here we are." Outside, someone had started filming. A crowd was gathering. Naomi didn't flinch from the cameras. "Let them see," she said. "Let everyone see what respect looks like when it's tested." They walked past Harker, who stood frozen by the door, his career unraveling second by second. And as they stepped out into the morning light, Isaiah whispered, "You'll make enemies for this." Naomi smiled faintly. Only the kind that were never friends to begin with. She opened the car door for him, then turned back toward the diner, where Millie was already talking to a local reporter, voice trembling but fierce. That clip would go viral by noon. And by evening, the police chief's phone would not stop ringing. But this wasn't just about one officer anymore. The mayor was about to dig deeper, into every complaint, every cover-up, every officer who thought coffee and contempt could wash away a conscience. By the next morning, the city was already talking, not because of headlines, but because of whispers. Every precinct had seen the footage, though no one knew who leaked it. A drive-through cashier mentioned it to the next customer. A bus driver replayed it during his break. Even the janitor at City Hall, mopping the marble floors, paused long enough to mutter, "That's the mayor's father." No one said the words out loud, but everyone knew what they meant. The department had crossed the wrong family. Naomi Bell walked through those same marble halls with her head high and her phone buzzing every few seconds. Reporters, aides, council members, all demanding comment. She ignored them all. Words could wait. Action could not. Her car had barely stopped before she stepped into the municipal building. The security guard on duty tried to offer a nervous greeting, but she was already moving, coat flowing behind her, heels striking fast against the floor. Aaron Miles, her deputy chief of staff, caught up halfway down the corridor. "Naomi," he said, lowering his voice, "the chief's already in damage control mode. They've been meeting since 6. "Good," she said. "Then they're awake enough to listen." When the elevator doors opened on the 10th floor, the scent of burnt coffee still lingered. Someone had spilled it in the hallway outside the chief's office. The irony didn't escape her. Inside, Chief Raymond Doyle and 3 senior officers were huddled over paperwork, speaking in clipped tones. As Naomi entered, the conversation stopped as if someone had cut power to the room. "Mayor Bell," Doyle said carefully, "we weren't expecting." "I noticed," she replied. He gestured stiffly toward a chair. "We're handling the situation internally. Officer Harker's record is being reviewed." "Stop." Naomi's voice was low, but it sliced clean. "Don't say reviewed. Say protected. That's what's happening here, isn't it?" The chief cleared his throat. "With all due respect, you're making this personal." Naomi stepped closer to his desk. A man poured coffee on a cardiac patient in uniform. "My father, but even if it were a stranger, you'd still be here trying to bury it." Doyle looked away, pretending to shuffle papers. "The footage is being exaggerated. It's a matter of perception." She pointed to the folder in front of him, her voice steady, not raised. "That folder has 3 redacted pages." "Why?" No one answered. She reached into her coat and set a flash drive on the desk. Unedited footage. Straight from a diner's security feed. "I had the owner send it directly to my office before anyone from your department could lose it." That got their attention. "Mayor Bell," Doyle said tightly, "you're crossing boundaries." "I'm redrawing them," she said. "Effective immediately, Officer Harker is suspended without pay. And I'm appointing an independent civilian review board to reopen every misconduct case your department closed over the last 5 years." 5 years, one of the lieutenants blurted. "That's hundreds of files." Naomi nodded once. "Then you'd better start reading." The chief leaned back, eyes narrowing. "You're taking on more than you can handle." She gave a faint smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "That's what men like you said to women like me my entire career. And we handled it anyway." For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the overhead lights and the faint ticking of the chief's desk clock, each second stretching the silence thinner. Naomi turned toward the door. "You have until noon to announce the suspension publicly. If you don't, I'll do it myself, from the press podium." And then she left, leaving behind a room full of men suddenly aware that the old rules had changed. Outside, her phone buzzed again. This time, a message from her father. "You don't have to fight every battle, baby." She smiled sadly and typed back, "This one's already started, Dad." By noon, the city's political machine had awakened like a wounded animal. Reporters staked out the courthouse steps, microphones waiting for her first word. Anonymous police union accounts on social media began spinning their version, claiming the mayor had abused her authority and politicized an internal matter. But Naomi had grown up in this city. She knew its rhythms. Every outrage carried a pattern: deny, deflect, delay, then disappear. This time, she intended to break the rhythm. She gathered her team in the briefing room, a mix of policy advisors, legal counsel, and her communications director, Tasha Reed, a former journalist who didn't mince words. "We have 2 battles," Naomi began. "One is public. One is internal. We're going to win both." Aaron leaned forward. "The chief's already making calls. They're trying to spin this as an overreaction." "Good," Naomi said. "That means they're scared." Tasha nodded. "We dropped the internal memo at 5 p.m. Document everything. Make it public before they can twist it." Naomi turned to her legal advisor. What about the victims from Harker's prior cases? We've identified 8 willing to speak. 2 have already filed civil rights complaints. The others, they're scared. Then we make them feel safe, Naomi said. We give them a platform. A press conference. Their words, not ours. Tasha smiled faintly. You're declaring war. Naomi's reply was quiet but firm. No, I'm declaring daylight. That night, her office light stayed on long after the building emptied. She combed through reports, grainy security footage, handwritten complaints, disciplinary forms stamped resolved. It was all there, hidden in plain sight. A woman named Gladys Monroe, 78, whose groceries had been kicked into the street during a stop. A teenage boy, accused of trespassing outside his own apartment complex. A store clerk who'd been shoved against a patrol car for talking back. Each story felt like another crack in the foundation she'd sworn to repair. At midnight, her phone rang. A known number. She hesitated, then answered. Mayor Bell, the voice said rough and low. You don't know me, but I saw what you did at the diner. Harker's not the only one. They think they can hide behind the badge. But I've got names, dates, audio. Naomi straightened. Who is this? Let's just say, someone who wore the uniform too long. Meet me tomorrow night. Off record. You'll get everything you need. The line clicked dead. She sat still, phone pressed to her ear, mind racing. Someone inside the department wanted to talk. Someone brave, or desperate, enough to break the silence. She looked out the window toward the skyline, lights flickering like pulse beats across the city. Her father's words echoed softly in her mind. You don't have to fight every battle, baby. Maybe not. But she could fight this one. And she'd make sure every single person who'd ever been silenced got to speak again. The city didn't sleep that night. It hummed with unease, the kind that seeps through radio static and flickers in news tickers. Everywhere Naomi Bell turned, her name was being spoken. Mayor takes on police department. Mayor's father sparks citywide reckoning. For some, she was a hero. For others, a threat. But Naomi didn't care about either. She only cared about the truth. And truth, she knew, never came easy, especially when it lived inside a badge. By morning, she'd reviewed every open complaint tied to Officer Troy Harker. But the deeper she went, the more she saw a pattern that couldn't have existed without help. Reports signed by supervisors who'd retired early. Missing evidence logs. Dates that didn't match witness statements. Each discrepancy was small enough to hide in plain sight. But together, they screamed cover up. When she arrived at City Hall, Aaron Miles was waiting with a look that told her things had just gotten worse. They're circling the wagons, he said. Police union lawyers filed an injunction to block your independent review board. They're claiming your office is interfering with due process. Naomi let out a slow breath. And the chief? Pretending to cooperate. But I've heard chatter. They're meeting off-site, trying to control the narrative before the board can even begin. Let them meet, she said. They can rehearse all they want. We're bringing the script. Tasha Reed, her communications director, walked in holding a printed transcript. We just got this from the whistleblower's email. He wants to meet tonight, 8 p.m., Old Transit Yard off Riverbend Road. Says he has audio files of officers joking about spills, lessons, and problem civilians. Naomi frowned. He trusts us enough to send this? Not trust, Tasha said. Desperation. He's risking his career, maybe more. Naomi glanced at the clock. Then we meet him. Quietly. No cameras. No leaks. By dusk, the mayor's sedan pulled off the main road into the abandoned transit yard, a maze of rusted buses and cracked asphalt. Sodium lights flickered overhead, casting long, uncertain shadows. The air smelled like oil and rain. Aaron was driving. Tasha sat in the back, checking her phone for GPS updates. He said bus 23, she murmured. They found it parked at the edge of the lot, stripped of seats, windows covered in grime. A man stepped out from behind it, his silhouette framed by the dull glow of a cigarette. He wore a faded police jacket, no badge, and a face that carried too many years of silence. Mayor Bell? He asked. Naomi nodded. You're the one who called? The man dropped his cigarette, grinding it under his boot. Name's Derek Shaw. 15 years on the force. I quit 6 months ago. Why come forward now? Naomi asked. He looked at her, eyes hollow. Because I saw what happened at that diner. And I realized if you hadn't been the mayor, it'd be buried by now. Like everything else. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small recorder. This has the conversations they thought no one would hear. Officers talking about civilians like animals. Joking about pouring drinks, about putting people in their place. Tasha leaned forward. How did you get this? Shaw hesitated. Internal training sessions. They'd record briefings. I started copying files before I left. Thought maybe one day, someone would listen. Naomi took the recorder carefully, as if holding something fragile and dangerous all at once. There are names in here? He nodded. Dozens. Harker wasn't acting alone. He's just the kind who gets sloppy. The wind picked up, rattling loose metal around them. Shaw looked over his shoulder, nervous. They'll come after me when this breaks, he said quietly. You know that, right? Naomi met his gaze. Then we'll make sure they can't touch you. You're protected. He smiled sadly. Ma'am, no one's protected in this city. Not really. But maybe it's time someone stopped pretending. He turned to leave, but paused. There's more. Go through the old files, the ones marked community incidents. The chief had those sealed last year after the DOJ audit. You'll find everything. And with that, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving only the faint smell of smoke behind. Naomi stood still for a moment, staring at the recorder in her hand. Its small red light blinked like a heartbeat. Let's go, she said. Back in her office that night, she plugged the recorder into her laptop. Aaron and Tasha stood behind her as the first clip played. A male voice, clear, confident. Thut. You see the way Harker handled that clerk last week? Dumped a drink right on her. Said she needed cooling off. We all lost it. Another voice joined in. Guy's fearless. That's what we need more of. Teaches respect. Then a third voice, colder, almost gleeful. Respect, huh? Funny word. You ever notice it only goes one way? The audio clicked off. Tasha's face had gone pale. They recorded this themselves? Locker room arrogance, Aaron muttered. They thought they were untouchable. Naomi leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. Every time they laughed, someone paid for it. For a moment, no one spoke. The city outside hummed beneath their silence. The sound of cars, sirens, life going on as if nothing had changed. But Naomi knew everything had. She opened her eyes. We release this tomorrow. Full transparency. No redactions. Aaron frowned. That'll start a war. Naomi nodded. Then let's win it. The next morning broke with rain. Heavy, relentless rain that seemed to wash the streets clean of excuses. Naomi stood before a podium at City Hall. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted her name. Behind her, a large monitor displayed the words Mayor Bell addresses police misconduct audio leak. Good morning, she began, voice steady despite the noise. Last week, my father was assaulted by an officer sworn to protect this city. What began as one act of cruelty has revealed something deeper, a culture of abuse that's gone unchecked for years. Today, that ends. She pressed a button on the podium. The audio began to play. The laughter filled the hall, echoing through microphones and speakers. It was vile, but unavoidable. Reporters froze. Even the camera operators stopped adjusting lenses. Naomi continued, her voice unwavering. These recordings were provided by a former officer who could no longer stay silent. They show not only misconduct but a mindset, one that views citizens as targets, not people. We will not tolerate it. When the recording stopped, the room erupted, questions flying, voices overlapping. Mayor Bell, are you calling for the chief's resignation? Will there be criminal charges? Is this a political stunt? Naomi raised her hand. Silence fell again. I'm not calling for resignations, she said. I'm calling for responsibility. Every officer named in these recordings will face independent review. Every supervisor who signed off on ignored complaints will answer before this city. She stepped back from the podium, letting the weight of her words settle. Justice doesn't need permission. It just needs courage. Across town, in the police headquarters, Chief Doyle watched the press conference from his office, the color draining from his face. Around him, officers whispered in shock. The union phones were already ringing. "She actually did it," one of them muttered. Another shook his head. "She'll burn the whole department down." Doyle's hand trembled as he picked up the phone. "Get Harker on the line," he barked. "Now." But it was too late. Naomi's release had triggered something bigger than any internal review. Calls were coming in from the Department of Justice, from civil rights lawyers, from news anchors who'd once ignored every local complaint. The story had become national. That night, Naomi visited her father. He was sitting by the window, the glow of the TV reflecting in his glasses. The news showed her standing at the podium, jaw set, voice firm. Isaiah looked up and smiled. "You're making history, baby girl." She knelt beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I'm just doing what's right." He chuckled softly. "Doing what's right is what gets you in trouble." She smiled. "Then it's the right kind of trouble." For a long moment, neither spoke. Rain tapped gently against the glass. Isaiah finally said, "You know they won't go quietly." "I don't expect them to," Naomi whispered. "But they'll go." Outside, the city pulsed, uneasy, divided, alive. And somewhere in a dark apartment, Derek Shaw watched the same broadcast, the corners of his mouth twitching into a faint smile. He'd done his part, but he also knew this was only the beginning, because the system Naomi had just cracked open wasn't built to fall easily. It would fight back, and when it did, she'd need allies stronger than truth alone. The city woke to sirens that weren't chasing criminals, but change. The police headquarters downtown, once a fortress of denial, now stood under a siege of truth. Protesters lined the front steps, holding signs that read, "Justice for all," and "Badges aren't shields." Inside, cameras and reporters waited, not for another statement, but for something far rarer, an apology. Mayor Naomi Bell stood at the podium flanked by the chief of police, Raymond Doyle. He looked smaller today, less like the man who once towered over press conferences, more like a figure deflated by the weight of exposure. His uniform was crisp, but his voice, when he finally spoke, cracked. "Today," he began, "we face what we failed to face for years." He cleared his throat, glancing down at the paper trembling in his hands. "I was made aware of misconduct reports that were never properly investigated. I allowed a culture of silence. And for that, I take full responsibility." The crowd was silent, listening, waiting for what would come next. Naomi stood beside him, her face composed, but her eyes unyielding. This was not victory, it was accountability, finally given shape. "And," the chief continued, "on behalf of this department, I want to personally apologize to every citizen we failed to protect, every voice we dismissed, and every life we disrespected." Behind him, a row of officers stood at attention, some veterans, some rookies. Among them was a face the city would never forget, Officer Troy Harker. He was no longer in uniform. He wore a plain suit, his badge turned in weeks ago. His attorney had advised him not to appear. But he'd come anyway. When Naomi had learned of it that morning, she hadn't been sure what to expect. But now, seeing him there, hands folded, eyes low, she understood that his presence meant something different than pride. It meant reckoning. She turned to him quietly. "You wanted to speak, Officer Harker?" He hesitated, then stepped forward to the microphone. The room went still. Every camera in the city turned toward him. "I spent 15 years thinking the badge made me better," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I thought wearing it meant I could decide who deserved respect." He looked down, then back up, eyes red-rimmed but steady. "When I poured that coffee, I wasn't seeing a man. I was seeing every lie I'd told myself about power." The silence was thick enough to touch. "I saw your father later, on TV," he continued. And I realized I'd humiliated a man who had done nothing but try to live quietly. I can't undo what I did, but I can tell the truth about who I became. And maybe that helps someone else stop before it's too late. He paused, swallowing hard. I'm sorry, Mr. Bell. I'm sorry to everyone I've hurt. I was wrong. From the front row, Isaiah Bell, frail, kind-eyed, still recovering, nodded slowly. You can start by meaning it, he said gently. Harker's shoulders dropped, a man surrendering to the weight he'd carried too long. I do. The room stayed silent for a long moment, not out of approval or condemnation, but reflection. For the first time, apology didn't sound like a headline, it sounded human. Naomi stepped forward again. Her voice carried the kind of calm that comes only after a storm. What happened at Millie's diner wasn't just one man's cruelty, she said. It was the result of years of protection, excuses, and silence. But silence doesn't keep peace, it keeps injustice alive. She turned to face the cameras, addressing not just the room, but the millions watching from living rooms, phones, and news feeds across the country. Starting today, she continued, this department will reopen every misconduct case from the past 5 years. Officers found guilty of abuse will not only face disciplinary action, they will stand here, in front of the people they've harmed, and apologize. A murmur rippled through the crowd, half disbelief, half awe. No one had ever seen a sitting mayor make such a demand. She gestured toward the stage wings. And that begins now. From the side, a door opened. Slowly, one by one, citizens walked out, those whose names had once been buried in reports and forgotten in archives. Gladys Monroe, 78, carrying a grocery bag with both trembling hands. Marcus Thompson, the young man once drenched in a traffic stop accident. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the pediatrician shoved against her car for talking back. Each took turns facing the officers who had wronged them. Different men, different ranks, all standing in a line of shame. One by one, the apologies came. Some stumbled. Some wept. Some barely managed words. But each voice added something to the air, something cleansing, something overdue. Naomi stood behind them, listening. Not satisfied, not triumphant, simply steady. The truth had found its way out, and that was enough. After the last apology, Isaiah rose slowly from his seat, using his cane for balance. He looked around the room, at officers, reporters, citizens, and said softly, "You can't wash away what's been done with words. But words can begin the work of change. Don't waste them." The applause that followed wasn't loud, it was respectful, rising slowly like dawn over a bruised city. Later, outside on the courthouse steps, Naomi faced a sea of microphones. The sky was beginning to clear after days of rain. Reporters shouted questions, some sharp, some sincere. "Mayor Bell, do you believe this will change anything?" She looked out over the crowd, her father standing just behind her. "It already has," she said, "because for the first time, the people who were unheard now have the microphone." "Are you satisfied with the outcome?" Another called. Naomi shook her head. "Justice isn't satisfaction. It's maintenance. You have to keep it alive every single day." A young reporter near the front lowered his camera. "And the police chief?" She glanced at the building behind her. "He's stepping down tomorrow. But this isn't about one man. It's about the system we let him protect." The reporters scribbled, cameras rolled, and somewhere beyond them, the crowd began to cheer. It wasn't wild, it was weary but hopeful, the sound of a city rediscovering its voice. As Naomi descended the steps, Isaiah took her arm for support. "You did it," he whispered. She smiled faintly. "No, we did. You raised me to believe that silence was never safety." He chuckled. "Your mama used to say the same thing. Guess she was right again." Naomi looked out toward the horizon, where the sunlight was finally cutting through the gray. "Maybe justice isn't a courtroom," she said quietly. "Maybe it's what happens after the cameras turn off." They stood there together for a long moment, the old man and the mayor, watching the crowd disperse, the city breathe. Behind them, inside the press hall, officers began packing up the microphones. On the stage, a single paper remained taped to the podium. In bold letters it read, No more silence. Naomi smiled when she saw it later, before turning to leave. The phrase would soon appear across billboards, schools, precinct walls, words that began as a movement and became a promise. By nightfall, the city lights glowed softer, cleaner. Officer Troy Harker walked out of the station for the last time, carrying only a small box of his belongings, his badge, his nameplate, and a folded photograph of his younger self in uniform, smiling. He stopped at the curb, looking back once before walking into the dark. Somewhere deep inside, shame and understanding finally met. And for the first time, he didn't look away. Weeks later, Naomi stood once again at Millie's diner. The same booth, the same window, the same hum of the radio. Her father sat opposite her, stirring his tea. "You ever think it's strange?" he asked softly. "How something as small as a cup of coffee could start all this?" Naomi smiled. "Maybe that's how change always starts, Dad. Small, bitter, and spilled by someone who thought it didn't matter." He chuckled. "And now, she said, looking out the window at the street full of passing strangers, "it matters more than ever." If this story moved you, if it reminded you that justice starts with ordinary people refusing to look away, leave a comment, share it, and subscribe for more stories that shine light where silence once lived. Because silence protects power. But truth? Truth protects everyone.